everyone and welcome back to my channel. I'm Deziel and today I'm showing you another way to do the finishing of the slit or the walking pleat. This sewing technique is more for jacket or coat because the lining will be attached at the bottom of the garment. For today's assembling demo, where the lining will be attached at the bottom of the garment, we'll use the same pattern that we used last time to do the lining loose at the bottom. So you have the same 4 pieces. If you don't have them yet, you could go get them in my Wix site in the free PDF section. And since last time I did add the step for today's exercise, it's mainly the 3 first steps that are different. For this demo, the first step is going to be to press the hem of the lining and press the hem for the self fabric. For the step 2, you're going to take your lining, place them face to face, and assemble your center back from the top all the way to the intersection. Remember the intersection of the diagonal line and the center back. You stop there with a back tack. You do the same thing for the self fabric. So you sew your center back until the intersection of the seam allowance with the angle and a back tack. Once both of your seams are done, we're going to press them open. And just like we did the pressing last time, you're going to look at the biggest piece, the full one. This one should remain flat. So you're going to press your seam open until the notch. Then you're going to go diagonal so your largest piece stay flat and this little part goes diagonal. You press like that. Do the same thing with the lining, but this time you'll see it's opposite direction. Open seam until the notch. And then keeping the biggest lining piece flat, you see the little diagonal. Now for the third step, we'll place good side of the lining with the good side of the fabric. And what we want to do is assemble the hem line together, hem of the lining with the hem of the self. Unfold your hem and assemble them together, both sides. Now once the hem are sewn, that's what you have. Next step is going to be to sew one side of the slit. I'm starting with the longer one or the full one. And to make sure you don't make mistake, I suggest that you pin your lining, fold the right side just like that. Fold at the notch, put it all together with the self fabric and put a pin. When it's done, right side with right side, you fold at the notch for the hem of the self, just like that. And that should allow you to sew your slit. Now they're exactly the same size. You're going to sew face to face, top to the bottom. Now this is what you get when you did your step 4. So this is the seam. When it's done, you're going to turn it to have it on the right side. And you're going to do a nice pressing so your seam is centered. Then you could turn it again the way it was, so right side with right side. And the 5th step is to assemble the other side, lining with the self. To do that, I place a little notch on the self that correspond to the hem notch on the lining. So you place them one over the other and we're going to sew that straight line, stopping exactly at the intersection of the straight line and the angle line. Place them together and just do that seam with a back tack. Now this is the seam we just did, the first seam of the step 5. Now we're going to do the second seam of that step 5. We want to close the bottom. Take the self fabric and fold right at the notch. You should have a notch at the bottom. We fold right at the notch. Now you could see we have a funny little opening. This is the width of your slit plus a seam allowance, which we're going to fold towards the notch, just like that. Place the two lines, those little lines, one next to the other, parallel, just like that, and you're going to sew that little distance that is the bottom of the slit. Now when it's done, this is what you get. You see my seam allowance fold, this little corner, and you could see I still have a little funny opening that we will close at step 6 right now. Just turn to have everything on the right side. Make sure you send the seam allowance here towards the slit and do a little pressing, everything in the final position. Then at this point you could even pin. Just put a ruler inside and you could put a pin here, making sure that you did not take the right side or the good side of the fabric. Once it's pinned, everything pressed, that's the final position. We're going to close that little space that is pretty much the size of my finger. So put your hand inside and hold it straight so you could go and stitch right here at 1 millimeter or 1/16 of an inch. Once it's done, that's what you have. And you see that we didn't grab at all the right side of the fabric. Now we're ready to do the 7th step, and this is the last one. It is the step where we want to close the angle. That's the last opening. To do that, you're going to place your larger size over the small size. And at this point, we're going to align the bottom of the lining, and we place them exactly one over the other. That's the final position that we want. You're going to take pins and pin them in position so it doesn't move while we do the 7th step. Now we could push everything inside or between the two layers. And at this point, if you remember, I ask you to cut the angle notch closer to the seam. I would say this one is cut already about 3 millimeter or 1/8 from the seam. And we don't do it before because it all depends on the seam itself. You cut closer to the seam, and when you cut, it's only the lining, not all the layers. There is 2 diagonal knots. You could go back on your pattern, you will see them easily. So one there that I just showed you, and the other one is on the other side, just here. And this cut, I will do it with you. So only 1 layer of lining, and you cut until a few millimeter or 1/8 of an inch. So now everything is inside. You're going to place your center on the center, hold both corners, and just roll it a bit. The last little pleat should disappear. Now once everything is fine like that, you're going to lift your lining, and between the layers, you're going to grab the 4 layer of your angle. 2 lining, 2 self, just these 4 layers, and we're going to sew them together. No adjustment, just like that. You're going to sew at the width of the foot. Again, the reason why we don't adjust the seam is just to give it a little chance to make sure that nothing pulls. Here my seam is done, and I want you to look at the length of the seam. I don't go all the way on either side, just again to give it a little chance, make sure nothing pulls. Finally, I just want to show you that I did sew my top part together so you could see easily that little excess that we put on the pattern, 5 millimeter or 1/4 inch extra that we put on the lining. And this little excess is just to make sure that nothing pulls. That's it for today. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. Stay safe, and I see you next time.